Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the SUMP training program and the introductory webinar for the training module 2 about setting up a monitoring and evaluation framework and defining indicators. My name is Ira Sibelius, and I'm your host today. I work for the Union of the Baltic Cities Sustainable Cities Commission that is hosted by the city of Turku in Finland, and we are the lead partner in the SUMPs for BSR project that is organizing this training program. Very briefly about the SUMPs for BSR project that is co-funded by the Indirect Baltic Sea Region program. Since the project began in 2023, our focus has been in supporting small and mid-sized cities to develop and apply sustainable urban mobility planning, and more specifically, encouraging shift towards active mobility, improved data collection, and development of monitoring and evaluation practices. You can read more about our project activities on our project website with the QR code and link here. Today, we are in the second module of our 5-module online training program. That is one of our key activities in the SUMPs for BSR project. It's designed especially for the mobility planners and experts in the small and mid-sized cities throughout the Baltic Sea region, but it's open to anyone who is interested. The training program consists of all the training modules consist of a webinar and a workshop and independent learning materials. And all the training materials, including recordings, will be available at the Baltic Sea Region SUMP Competence Center website with the QR code and link that you can see here. And there you can also find all the agendas for upcoming webinars and workshops and the registration form if you haven't registered yet. We are also organizing a SUMP clinic offering tailored support to 10 cities, and each selected city will get 2 individual consultation meetings online with our experienced SUMP experts led by Dr. Kristiina Gauce. And as a result, each city receives a personalized roadmap for on how to tackle the local challenges specified in the application form. And we have just ended the first call for applications, and we still have a few places open. So if you're interested, we are now opening the second call for applications that will be open until 20th of February. So go to our SUMP clinic site under the Baltic Sea Region SUMP Competence Center and fill in the application form there. This is the agenda for today. We will begin with an overview of the basic principles for monitoring and evaluation by Kristiina Gauce, followed by Professor Marcin Wowek from University of Gdansk, introducing us the M&E framework developed in the SUMPs for BSR project, as well as some practical tools for developing a local M&E plan and selecting suitable indicators. We will also hear 2 city case presentations from Cesis in Latvia and from Malmö in Sweden. And before we go on, I would like to remind that the webinar is being recorded and that you can send questions in the Q&A box that you see in the Zoom panel. But now it's time to introduce our first speaker, Kristiina Gauce, who is a sustainable urban mobility expert with extensive over 20 years experience. And she is our training expert for the training modules 1, 2, and 5 in this SUMP training program. And now she will give us an overview of the basic principles of monitoring and evaluation framework. Over to you, Kristiina.
Thank you, Ira. Good morning to everyone. I see quite a number of people coming here, which is, I think, a very good sign of I don't know, engagement and content of our program. So let me share my slide. Please let me know if it had arrived. It had arrived, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we can start. So once again, good morning, and I know that majority of you are from Baltic Sea region, so I hope you are warm and very well because it's really cool around our countries. And as you're already presented, we will have very interesting and practical presentations today. So my little role here is to go a little bit through the principles and to articulate and highlight once again why it is important to have this monitoring and what the main elements here and is any point to have monitoring without evaluation? So that type of the questions I would go through quite quickly, so I have more time for like really encouraging presentations from my friend and colleague Martin, and then from our neighboring cities. So first thing to start is, yeah, why do we really need this monitoring and evaluation? So we do. We do, and I think I already emphasized on that during the first module and during our presentations and speaking about the main steps of SUMP, which we will come in a minute, but it's really important. First of all, it's like the main tool and the main your equipment to ensure transparency and accountability. So basically, you're not only dreaming, you're not only doing something you believe is the best for your city, but you have some accountability and you're doing something on purpose. You relate your actions with the objectives, you relate your data collection with possible indicators and so on. So that's the one of the main goals of monitoring. But then it's very important to track the progress, right? So it's not enough just to prepare nice SMP and to implement it, hopefully. It's also very important to understand this does this lead you somehow to the success you were willing for your city? And are you in line with your mobility goals? And once you know you are, you can report and have evidence-based dialogue with decision-making people for better financing, for more and more radical maybe measures. If it doesn't work the way you were expecting, you still can speak to citizens and to explain why. You can say that we had this data, we had those indicators, we had those measures, and we thought, and rightfully so, because of valid evidence from somewhere else, that it could be working, but it failed. It's not the end of the world. You make assumptions on one measure and one indicator, you measure that it's not working after implementation and you can take remedial actions. But again, for this, you need to have very clear chain of elements from the idea to implemented measure effect and consequences. So coming back to our SEMP cycle, one could think that, okay, so why do we speak about it now? Monitoring and evaluation is like really the end of the SUMP cycle. In a way, you are right. It's 11 and 12 steps of the whole SUMP cycle before starting updating or upgrading your SUMP. However, as I already spoke last time, it's very important to think about not to forget monitoring and data and indicators from very beginning of your SUMP. Already when you start preparation and when you think about data collection plan, you would like to fulfill with the stage of data collection and analysis, you already need to think what type of data you would be able to recollect again and again. So maybe it's worth to collect for preparation of SUMP. If you know that that would be something you would be doing only once and only once for preparation of SUMP, maybe it's not worth because you will not have reasonable data to compare after implementation. So already at very beginning, it's very important what type of the problems or maybe feasibilities you want to check with the data and would you be doing it again and again during monitoring. Also, it's very important to think how you will determine your success, right? It's not enough to say, I want to have a healthy city. It's very important to say how you understand this being healthy. Does that mean less people dying from lung diseases? Does that mean less people killed in the roads? Does that mean that, I don't know, more quality in the public spaces. Already in strategy development, you need to be quite precise, defining your vision and success, and then to address it as much as possible with your measures, so you know very, very well what exactly, what precisely you would need to do to reach that success you determined already. And then if you plan it precisely, and if you have proper and rational implementation plans, and you have quite a good accountabilities next to each action and measure, then it's quite easy for you at least to monitor implementation progress and then maybe effects and consequences. So that's the idea when and not only when I highlighted, but also during all the process to think about monitoring. So as a how to say, as a good preparation, and Martin would be talking about different type of tools and fact sheets, what suits very well for especially small and medium-sized cities. However, my general suggestion is not to think that it's enough, writing visions and a lot of different text and ideas and sentences, that this could be somehow translated very easily to monitoring and evaluation plan. Most likely, you would need quite a detailed action plan. What precisely, to what extent, in what dimensions, and in what quantities, and when and by whom needs to be done. And for this action plan, you need to have operational plan and implementation fact sheets to understand how the process of implementations should look like, because you need to start your monitoring not after implementation is over, because it might be never be the case. You need to start your monitoring the next day after adoption of SUMP. And the first thing you need to monitor is the implementation happening or not. And if it's happening, is it happening to extent you planned or no? Maybe something is being delayed. Maybe something is being very not successful. Maybe some suppliers are not coming. Maybe some procurement is not happening. So those already implementation process, how to say, details and messages, they affect very much your monitoring and evaluation plan. So you need clear action plan with operational details, and then you can build on that monitoring and evaluation plan as a documents or a strategies or the fact sheets. And I already start mentioning that you need, yes, you need to monitor progress. Are you doing what did you plan to do? And the results as those pure primitive quantities. So if the plan was, if the measure was to, I don't know, to build a 10 kilometers of bicycle lane, so you need to monitor, are you building in 2026 as you plan it, and are you building exactly 10 kilometers as you plan it? Because if you're not, it's quite unlikely that you would be reaching effect you were planning. And for example, maybe your effect you were planning was to change proportion of cyclist and model split by 1%. So if you didn't implement your measure 100% in time, then can you expect that effect would be in time as you were affecting? So those relations need to be clearly defined in your monitoring plan. And after all, after different results and from different measures and different actions would come to different type of effects, you might wish to check, did you reach your overall impact, which is related with objectives and strategy of your SUMP, for example. Did you really reduce the CO2? Do you really increase safety? Do you really increase happiness in the city, and overall the impact? So that's the idea. Multi-steps needs to be considered, but Martin will tell you more how to do that. And therefore, it's not a secret that they have main and very few important components in monitoring and evaluation. And I keep speaking about monitoring, but I also want to mention that evaluation is as crucial and as important word in this double wording as monitoring, because without evaluation, what is happening and why, thinking why it's happening, there is not really that much of use of monitoring. So for monitoring and evaluation, you of course need to have indicators, and Martin would be speaking a lot about that. But also you need to have baseline. Otherwise, you cannot compare your future indicators with the progress and achievements and dynamic which is happening. So you need to have baseline. And I said already, you need to be quite rational and realistic about baseline. You might be not able to collect all the possible data in the world. So you need really to focus on those who are answering your problems and your vision in the city. And you have to have targets, of course. And then you have regular monitoring cycles. You need to be in your monitoring plan, you need to be very clear. Some things you might be doing quarterly to check are your colleagues organizing procurement, are contractors, I don't know, doing technical designs and so on. Some of the things like effect or impact you might be checking only every 2 or 5 years, and maybe only after 10 years when all the targets needs to be reached. So those monitoring cycles needs to be defined very well. And of course, it's very important to have clear responsibilities in the governance. You cannot you cannot do a lot if you do not have a certain authority in for example in your municipality. Then you can only collect maybe data with your own um, feasibilities of department and so on. But in order for evaluation to be in power, you need to have quite authority to say different departments, you are late, you are responsible for this. You need to collect this data. You need to keep communicating to the citizens, I don't know, this output of some measure and so on. So it's very important to agree on those things quite in advance before SUMP preparation, but at latest at this moment. All right. And for indicators, I will not stop here very much because there are inspiring case studies from CSS and from Malmö, but also methodological approach from Marcin. But I think it's very important to be sure that your indicator groups, even if you decide to go with very, very few, they need at least to respond each of them to the topic. So to have at least one indicator for mobility performers, right? My favorite and yours favorite most likely is modal split. Then to have some operational on acceptance of the services your city providing. So most likely it would be a qualitative indicator, some social, economic, environmental, and of course safety indicator should be the case. And there are a lot of libraries, and Martin will show some examples as well. And we also have urban mobility indicators for TNT nodes. So there are a lot of inspiration to look at, but it's very important uh, to answer the main questions. Are those indicators you would be collecting, do they match objectives you set for your SEMP? Do you have resources to observe those indicators? Do you have data as a baseline? And do you know if somebody already are collecting those indicators by other institutions? So those are core questions, and it will help you to avoid most frequent mistakes, which Martin will also will comment in his presentation. So also, I think I already highlight importance that for indicators and for baseline data, for targets, it's very important that you have not only quantitative data, but also qualitative. You might be in your monitoring, you might be observing that, okay, modal split for usage of public transport is not changing, but then without the qualitative survey and qualitative indicator on perception, on satisfaction, on performance, on some other social indicators, you might be not able to understand why it's not happening, and you might be not able to take remedial actions how to change the situation. And also there are few types of the data. Primary, if you have budget to collect data yourself, but also always recycle secondary data, which is already being collected by the other entities. And if you have some limited resources, just simplify the collection. And I think CSS would be presenting on cameras implementation and how do they do data collection for this town in the Latvia. But there are a lot of simple, even simpler techniques how to collect data, going to school, speaking to focus groups, doing some some manual counts on main crossroads, and identifying with crowdsourcing applications the main problems on safety and so on. So there are a lot of creative ways to get to the data collection, both for the baseline but also for indicator as well. And the last very important topic here is engagement with the different stakeholders. We will speak in a minute what type of stakeholders and why to reach. But with this slide, I really want to remind you that it's very important. Uh, Overall, it's very important to get in touch with different type of stakeholders with different type of formats and techniques and purposes in different stages, but also for monitoring. For some stakeholders, you would need like really very clear question and request, give me some data. With some, you need maybe to consult, for example, for universities on indicators and how to set the targets, some professionals maybe. With some, you need to communicate results. So this is happening, this is not happening. Can we change the plan? Can we get additional funding? So different type with different purpose in different phases, stakeholders needs to be involved also for monitoring and evaluation needs. And which type of stakeholders suggestably would be involved, I will tell you in my next slide. But before that, I would like to hear from you. We put into the Mentimeter, which I would invite you to connect by scanning the QR code or going to menti.com and using this a digital code. If you could connect and give me an idea which you are thinking the most crucial actors to be involved in evaluation, that would help me to finalize my presentation as well. So uh, what we were thinking that the main groups of stakeholders to be involved are local politicians, measures managers, measure implementers, target groups as end users, and our type of non so close rated stakeholders. But our request to you is to rank which you think are the most important, especially for evaluation. Basically, you do your monitoring, you get the first results arriving, you see that something is not working well or working totally in different perspective than you were expected. So whom you think the first you would need to consult and to discuss the results and possible actions to be taken. So I see quite a few people joined already. Not all of you. Why are not you joining? Are you writing your emails now? Did Okay, it worked. More people joining and more people are voting. So I'll wait a second. Okay, it's still moving. But I see that one item. I think it's already unbeatable. So it's good to see that you see the point of consulting with experts, because truly, yes, you are totally right. You might observe very well with the institutional capacities you have in municipality that something is happening, not to the maybe programmed result, but then consulting with experts, is that normal? Is that already some threat to the measure success? What possible alternatives should be discussed? I think it's very, very good to approach experts. So well done for those. And of course, yes, and end users, measure target groups. I totally agree with you. Those are end users, and only them can explain you very well why this measure had worked or not worked on their daily life. Okay, so I think we got a clear overview on this question, and we can move to finalizing this presentation. So Yes, basically, you are totally on purpose. We put all the possible groups of stakeholders, not that some of them is less and some of them is more important, just to see how you rank from your daily perspectives. And once again, I'm very happy that you acknowledge the need and the importance of experts and end users, people affected by Azure. So this is very good. Also, there are quite a important target group, politicians and decision makers, again for this transparency effect. So you need to be constantly informing them what is happening, why it is happening, and if it's not happening, you might expect that they would give you some additional funds or some, and if something is very happening, very good, they might be even going for unexpected radical measures. For example, if some of the UVAR measures, like, I don't know, access restriction to some particular areas of the city worked well, they might, and you prove it with results and affect results, not only implementation results, then they could be going for deeper discussion. So those are different type of actors, and as I said, and we will speak also on the module 5, there are different techniques and different formats how to reach them and when to reach them. You cannot and you shouldn't reach all of them equally with the same amount of information and the questions on all the phases. But we will speak it at the end of our training. And yeah, last my slide before I go and give over to Martin is again, it's a half full and half empty glass. There are quite a lot of challenges with monitoring and evaluation, but also opportunities. So basically, with monitoring, if you ensure continuity and accountability, if you don't do monitoring only once time, if you organize it with some templates, same templates, quarterly, monthly, annually, biannually, you can not only keep track of all the key events, but you can ground the base for your other actions and for more and more ambitious measures implementation if you are successful. If you are not successful, you just don't waste money on unsuccessful measure and you take remedial actions. And here we come to the challenge too. It's very difficult to admit that, okay, this measure failed. And quite likely somebody who was very keen of that measure made a wrong assumption. But as long as you would be doing always transparently and always in big consultation with stakeholders, it would be common ownership of the measure and common ownership of the decision that you need to go to some other actions because some of the measures is not working, for example. So it's challenging, but it gives you good ground for opportunities to solve different ideas and situations in your city. So this is it from my side. Thank you for listening. I hope I overlooked a little bit the idea of monitoring and evaluation, and then my colleagues will get into the really good practical technical details, right?
Thank you so much, Christina. I see no questions yet in the chat, so now I encourage everyone to formulate your thoughts in the Q&A box. So it's very good time to ask from experts. And also taking up on what Christina was talking about the data collection, we will organize in March the training module 3 about data collection on active mobility, and also in May we organize the training module 5 about stakeholder engagement if you're interested in these topics. But now it's time to give the floor to Associate Professor Marcin Wowek from the Department of Transport Market from the University of Gdansk. And he has been our driving force in the SUMPs PSR project, working with this topic of monitoring and evaluation, and in charge of the development of the M&E framework and the accompanying practical tools. So over to you, Marcin.
Thank you, Ira, very much. It is a big pleasure to present part of our deliverables and achievements in front of such a large and international group. So I will make my screen larger. Wait a moment. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
So we can start. This is agenda for my presentation. I will start my counting machine because monitoring evaluation is a huge topic and we could probably discuss over next days about it. But I will start instead of introduction to give you a list still unfinished of popular mistakes in monitoring and evaluation development. Then we will present in a very short way monitoring evaluation framework developed within SUMPs for BSR project. And also we are going to address challenge of different size of cities, because in the Baltic Sea region we speak about very small cities and mid-sized cities. So of course we are not the region with mega cities in the Far East Asia way, but still our cities of different size face a lot challenges according to sustainable urban mobility. Then we are going to present two tools we developed already, especially with focus on indicator selector tool. Finally, two short case studies and short summary. So instead of introduction, those mistakes are one of the main reasons we started this project, because as a consultant and scientist for many years, I am involved in sustainable urban mobility planning in Poland, Baltic Sea region, Ukraine as well. And in SUMPs, we found that cities tend to monitor almost everything. Of course, they want to be precise, they want to cover different processes, different topic areas, but as a result, in many cases, we finally have too many indicators to be measured, which makes a big burden for cities over next years, because during preparatory process of a SUMP, there is a kind of enthusiasm. Sometimes we can collect extra money for developing a SUMP. We are always over optimistic. So at this stage of SUMP preparation or development, we want to be very advanced, and that's why we select a big list of indicators. And after 2 or 3 years, when SUMP has been already adopted, someone else in our organization discovers that he or she has to deal with a big list of very diversified topics to be measured, which means a big databases to be collected, sometimes with different stakeholders, in several cases external to the city. That was nicely presented by Christina in her presentation. Sometimes we want to put too many things in one indicator, which leads us to too complicated indicators. Sometimes they are complicated because we try to measure very complex topics, especially on spatial planning. And then we are building too complicated indicators. Sometimes there is no alignment between indicators and the objectives. Objectives are not precisely measured, but of course we can say we have a long list of indicators, which means that our monitoring evaluation scheme is very good. Also, in several cases, indicators could not reference the baseline. So how can we measure the progress if we are not referencing the baseline? It was also presented by Christina that when we discuss about diagnosis, when we are developing existing picture of mobility in our city, we have to speak by numbers as well, because we need baseline to be measured. And of course, the world is not built only on indicators. Sometimes we lack of qualitative evidence and user feedback. So we are not arguing that everything must be measured precisely by 1 millimeter, but of course we also have to adjust our monitoring evaluation scheme by qualitative evidence, by focus groups, by in-depth interviews, by typical surveys which are being made over last years in different cities in our region. Also, sometimes we forget about existing strategic documents that already exist, because our SUMP is not the only one document in our city, which is binding and which is important. Therefore, we have to think about other strategic documents. We have to provide their overview and sometimes extract existing indicators that can be already used to supplement or to develop our urban mobility plan. And the advantage is that we already have indicator that could bring a bridge, that could deliver a bridge between existing strategic framework of our city and sustainable urban mobility plan. Also, we found that cities are using inconsistent methodologies, which refers mainly to walking. We know that walking is absolutely out of discussion. It is one of the most crucial elements of sustainable city, especially for small cities. It is absolutely baseline, but also for mid-sized cities like Gdynia, Malmö, Paniewierzyce in our Baltic Sea region. Walking is also part of more complex mobility chains. So for public transport users, they don't start their trip exactly at their home because they have to access public transport stop or railway station. But of course, the question is, how are we defining walking trip? Is it just trip, or is it somehow defined by distance, by time, and so on? So it is also very difficult and tricky to compare different modal splits that include walking. And of course, we can extend this list. Those mistakes are not all we identified within our work, but it is one of the strongest motivation to develop precise monitoring and evaluation scheme for every city, regardless of its size. And that's why the framework in our project was exactly to support cities, but cities of different sizes. So for our work, we divided cities as very small cities up to 30,000 people, small cities up to 80,000 inhabitants, and medium cities around 200,000 inhabitants. And part of our tasks have been exactly adjusted to city size. That's why we prepared framework for monitoring and evaluation for sustainable urban mobility. And two main tools of this framework and framework for monitoring evaluation is indicator selector tool and monitoring evaluation plan template, which are shortly described later on. But of course, cities are facing common challenges, but sometimes scale of those challenges are very strictly related to urban size. So we found that almost half of EU population resides in small urban areas. In fact, they are not citizens of huge mega cities or big urban areas. And also in the Baltic Sea region, its urban landscape is shaped by mainly small and medium-sized cities. They create absolutely most of our urban activity, urban challenges, and they are fundament of our socio-economic development. Recent 10T regulation update increased number of functional urban areas on the 10T network in Europe, increasing their number to more than 400. And also 135 functional urban areas are now located in the Baltic Sea region, and they represent almost 2/3 of their total population. And of course, their role is important, but those functional urban areas are expected to have a SUMP in place by 2027. So for several cities, it is a kind of new discovery that they have to prepare a sustainable urban mobility plan, not only for the city, but for the functional urban areas. And of course, when we speak about sustainable urban mobility, we are not talking about transportation. We speak about urban landscape. We speak about land use. We speak about conflicts, because conflicts are typical element of urban mobility, and sustainable urban mobility plan is about of managing the conflicts and of course finding stakeholders and developing collaboration. So in our work, we found especially if we want to measure something, we have to measure something on certain levels. So we have to search a compromise between a very detailed approach and the feasibility of the document we are talking about. So it is important, what document are we discussing about? Is it a SUMP for the metropolitan region, for functional urban area, for the city itself, or even for a smaller district? Or are we implementing measures for transport corridor or even for local street? So if we want to measure something, if we want to measure baseline and then to measure achievements, we need accurate, complete data on time, consistent, reliable, correct, available, and relevant. Of course, this is theory. In fact, data availability is decreasing when we go to details, to smaller areas. And always in the monitoring evaluation, we have to navigate between the expectation to have the most accurate data, but also to get data which is available or possible to get. Finally, we are going to present initially the toolkit. The first, our tool we developed in the project is the indicator selector tool, because we found that when we speak about monitoring evaluation, most of discussions are centered around indicators. So we started to extract existing indicators for numerous strategic documents, project pilots. Then we selected them using Eisenhower matrix. So we divided indicators between according to their importance, but also according to data availability. We evaluated those indicators with project partner cities and finally tested them to get a final tool, which is available under this link. So we hope that you can visit the link and make yourself familiar with that tool. This is big database of different indicators to support cities of different sizes. Of course, we know that there are cities of mid-size. They are well equipped with knowledge, with resources. They collaborate with academia, with consultancy companies. So maybe their willingness to use this indicator selector tool could be lower, but especially for small and very small cities, it could be completely different. But to make this navigation more easier, we divided indicators. You can pre-select, you can filter them by the city size, by the importance, by the type of indicator, type of mobility. We implemented several categories like walking, cycling and micromobility, public transport, shared mobility, cars, city logistics and light freight, and something which is very special to the Baltic Sea region, which we found during several workshops and discussions, heavy freight transport. Sometimes small or mid-sized cities, they have logistics center, they have seaport, which strongly affects the daily traffic, and also we address this heavy freight transport. Of course, we know that this area is usually external to the city, but anyway, it is still important to address it and to start monitor also those processes. Also, you can filter indicators by particular theme, by accessibility, by economy, environment, governance, health, and safety. And something which is subjective evaluation done by us and by experts and cities we collaborate with. Data collection effort, you need to get the data. So we divided them into 3 categories: easy, hard, and medium. And finally, EU alignment, core like 10T mandatory, because this regulation on 10T also implemented new indicators, optional or recommended. So finally, you can select from the database of more than 200 indicators, but according to filters, probably you won't be crushed with types of indicators. Another tool is monitoring and evaluation template. Monitoring evaluation template is a result of our discussions and work with cities to provide a template that could offer a clear structure for designing or improving the local monitoring evaluation plan. Also, this tool should be flexible for cities of different sizes and organizational financial capacities. It should strongly emphasize on active mobility indicators, and it practically complement the indicator selector tool and contains several examples taken from the Baltic Sea region. And this is a relatively short document, mainly divided by several segments or clusters containing several questions. So you can use this monitoring evaluation plan template to create a standalone monitoring evaluation plan that could be part of your SUMP. You can use it to update or improve the monitoring section of an existing mobility plan. You can just use it as a checklist. If you have a SUMP already adopted, you can use those questions to use them as a checklist. You can also use it for internal evaluation of current practices and resources, or maybe guide to collaborate between planners, management and decision makers. Because we found, and it was also highlighted by Mentimeter activity provided by my colleague Christina, that local politicians are among the top stakeholders in the SUMP process. And of course, we identified several, let's say, politically risky indicators and topics, for instance, parking policy. This is something which always increases political temperature in most of cities. So sometimes it is important to wisely communicate measures and indicators. For us, those national and overnational European regulation was also very important. So we use this 10T requirements as a guiding tool. But of course, we took into account typical experts or people involved in the city administration for urban mobility planning, like planners, mobility experts, transport planners. But we have to respect also local politicians, because their activity, their involvement is crucial in implementation of the SUMP. We know many very good SUMPs, very ambitious SUMPs, only partly implemented. This is structure of our monitoring evaluation plan template. It consists of 4 main pieces: introductory part, then part focused on evaluation of the current monitoring evaluation framework, and then part which we named as a from targets to political decision-making process. This includes several subsections like setting targets and indicators, monitoring evaluation procedures, and something which was strongly advocated by cities, transforming the monitoring evaluation framework into a political decision-making process. This is something which is, in our opinion, quite new, and we address this topic from the practical point of view. That was also my, let's say, personal experience, because for 25 years I've been a city councillor in Gdynia, developing and implementing a SUMP, and that was something that I discovered, that monitoring could be also a tool for political, let's say, political conflicts. That's why we have to equip our decision makers in a very good toolkit. So this is a short overview of part of our monitoring evaluation plan template. It consists selected elements. Most of them are illustrated by practical examples. And finally, monitoring evaluation plan template is finished by certain table where you can put part of your monitoring activities and make it more clear. We also use this table over next week together with indicator selector tool. And this is our next case, City of Cesis, but because I am almost on time, I will switch this slide to some summary. Monitoring evaluation framework includes two tools, selector indicator tool and monitoring evaluation plan template. We developed them in collaboration with cities and experts within our project. They are going to help to develop, improve, and update monitoring evaluation schemes for cities of different sizes. And within next week, we will use them during our workshop. So again, please visit our indicator selector tool website to pre-select different indicators to find out how it is working. So thank you very much. And we are always ready and happy with any questions you have and comments. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I wanted to remind that these tools are also linked under the training module 2 on the BSR SUMP Competence Center website, so you can find the links also in there. Both tools, so the local M&E plan and the indicator selector tool. And in case you have any questions now to Martin, you can share them in the Q&A box. But now it's time to move on and hear a few city case presentations. And the first one comes from Cēsis in Latvia. And we have mobility planning expert Ritvars Šilkovs. And like in many small municipalities around the Baltic Sea region, he's a multidisciplinary specialist, but also a cycling enthusiast. And today he will share us insights on developing monitoring in a small city. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be part of this webinar, and thank you for a nice introduction. So I will share the presentation. Do you see it?
Perfectly.
Yeah. Okay. So about our small city, I will give a small introduction on our city and what kind of main challenges we faced and how we approach them. So, and a little bit about the data developing monitoring for sustainable mobility. So, if you are familiar with the CESIS, great. If not, feel free to visit us. It's a very nice town located in the northern part of Europe. So, from our point of view, it's medium-sized town in Vidzeme region located in the northern part of Latvia. But from the SUMP perspective, we are very small town, only at about 16,000 residents. So it's quite common and very popular destination for tourism, culture, and active recreation, as we are located within in a core of the Gauja National Park, which is oldest in our country. And about the city itself, it's very compact, walkable, and bikeable, but very car-centric city, so very car dependent. So the main challenge is looking from the mobility perspective is really strong dependence on the private cars. So it's without a car, it's very not so common to move around. So it's limited public transport availability. Public transport often not competitive in time or comfort compared to the car, which I could move a little bit further for the excuses for changing habits. I would say this is also a very big challenge Coming back to the dependence on cars, limited public transportation, or not competitive on time because we have our feeling about time and comfort. And the hilly terrain, it's cycling challenging in a way, but it's also more excuse than than a real challenge, in my opinion, I would say. So yeah, this is the thing, and then it's really seasonal. So it's also the tourism creates seasonal traffic pressure mainly in the summer season. In the winter season, it's a bit calmer, but yeah. So these are the main challenges that we we came up during the SUMP as well. So about the approach to challenges. So previously our city didn't had any model split research done. So this was the one big thing to start with to have the real picture of the habits of the daily movement of the people. So this is the one thing that we approached. Another thing that it's very important was to cross-departmental collaboration within the municipality because the mobility is a cross-sector policy, not just the transport. So culture, health, education. So this all comes together when it's about the mobility. And during the project, we implemented also the artificial intelligence computer vision based traffic cameras that really allows us now to monitor the problem areas, if we can call like that, and then we can have some baseline data to start with, because without data, it's just about ideas, but not about real data-based solutions. So, and then when we got to these main challenges in previous slide, we understood also that it's very important the stakeholders involvement, and also for the from the SUMP project really helped us to focus on these things. And now the next big thing is what comes, I would say, continuously is the Intermod project, which will be focused more on the public transport system improvement. So these will be the big things that it's from our approach to these challenges. And step by step experimentation and learning, one step at a time, and try to see and evaluate them. So implemented solutions in our case within the SUM project, we implemented one of the things was the temporary and pilot cycling lines. So we are trying to expand our existing but not so developed cycling routes. So with this project, we extend this net and this smart monitoring and the cameras. We try to monitor these places and understand is it working or need to do some adjustments on this. And we strengthened institutional cooperation and planning capacity, because then we really, it's all about the dialogue and cross collaboration within the project implementation department and environmental department and so on. So about the cameras itself. So the new element within this project, we in the CESIS installed the artificial intelligence based traffic counters in multiple city locations. So this is one thing that you really need to, which will maybe go later to the lessons learned, but the idea is that you need to really, before putting the camera, think what you want to measure and what kind of data you want out of it, because some places was not so efficient in our opinion, because you have data, but it's really you don't do nothing with this place much. Or in other cases, it was really helpful to monitor the situation that I will touch a little bit later. So the sensors use the computer vision to count pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles, and it also separates the vehicles like buses or cargo trucks or vans. So you have a large amount of data, and if you can see in this picture on the right side, these lines. These are the lines that you make, and then based on these lines, it counts cars and any other type of transport coming in, coming out, time, every day. No, basically, you have a lot of big cloud of data. So, and this big cloud, this brings to our next challenge for us is the finding efficient ways to analyze and visualize this data. So you need to know what you want, and then it's much easier to focus on it. And a good example is from data to action. Action is the main street in Old Town. It's called Riga Street. It's already 3 years in a row. It will be the fourth year, if I'm not wrong, this year that we are closing in the summer the street for a weekend. And in the first year, it was a big compliance from the shop owners on the street. They were complaining about the thing that the cars, lack of cars or closing the street for the cars will bring down their business because, in their opinion, the cars bring the money, not the human bring the money. So, and then we needed to improve, and car counts reveal predominance of road traffic. So this street, everyone knows, but there was no data that this street is really a transit street, and the people who are passing it, majority are not spending any time there to. So this was the good example to prove when it's decision based on data, not opinions. So there before was opinions, and then there was a data. So we are keeping up with that. So this is very good example for this. So yeah, and as Martin and Christine already gave you the bigger view on the monitoring and evaluation, so that it's really turns data into better policy decisions. So data based on decisions based on data. So and it's helps to evaluate if the sustainable mobility measures really work or not, or should be improved. And it creates evidence for funding political consensus and community trust as it's one by one. So now the SUMP we will make the public transport system more, and there is no so big option to work on it. And from lessons learned. Well, what gets measured gets managed. So it's if you have the data, you have something to work with, and this really monitoring evaluation of mobility plan drive real action. Really gives an overview of the current situation, and about the technology that we used, it's really allows to collect huge amount of data. So it's really time and cost efficient. So it's not you don't need to do physically counting or some so the computer do the all the things for you already. And it's very essential that we have interdepartmental cooperation. Without that, it's not working. So, and to move, so from our experience, we would say advise or not to make the same mistakes or so is that if your city has no monitoring and evaluation framework, make it your first priority. So it's really gives a clear overview of the current mobility situation and understand where to act first, and also really put attention and invest time in analyzing collected data, not only collecting it, because it's one thing is to collect, another is to really get the right information out of it so you can work and turn data into dialogue and then in action. And also the international cooperation is really important, and it's an opportunity to learn faster and and try to avoid the mistakes that has been made already by other partners or yourself. And very important is partnership. So if the internal capacity is limited, then there is really important to talk, to build partnerships, to get the outsource of some expertise or something, and really step by step. So small steps can lead you to systemic change. So this was briefly from our side. Thank you so much for listening and giving me the floor. So have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritvars. Thank you for sharing your experiences. And before we go on to the next case presentation, maybe Christina and Marcin, if you would like to comment on the cases, maybe we can take a short discussion after the next presentation. But now I will introduce to you our next speaker. And he is Andreas Nordin, from a traffic planner from the city of Malmö in southern Sweden. And Andreas has been working with different aspects of city planning in Malmö for over 14 years. And now he's working in strategic traffic planning, including Malmö's SUMP. And he will share us experiences on the monitoring and evaluation for the SUMP in Malmö. Now I will give you the floor.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I realized that I never included a slide of where Malmö is and about Malmö. But so Malmö is in the south of Sweden, and we are in a Swedish context, a big city, but in a European context, I would say maybe medium city, 350,000 inhabitants. And I will talk a little bit about what we are doing to evaluate and monitor our SUMP. And to start with the process, when we are evaluating our SUMP we're supposed to do this every 4 years when the comprehensive plan is renewed or considered to be renewed. So it actually has been it usually takes longer than that, but we use this SUMP to make planning documents that so the SUMP currently aims for 2040, and the SUMP or the planning documents we make in needed areas from the SUMP, so it can be for biking and for traffic safety and for public transport and so on. And we use this to make a budget process to look for the next year and the coming years, and then we set the budget. And then how did this work? So all the arrows, that's what I'm going to talk about. How does what we actually do affect how we plan? We've heard a lot about this already, but it is very very nice to have the model split as a basis for goal-oriented planning. So on the right here, we can see our current model split and the goals, or our current goal for 2040. And our big thing is that we have included the shared mobility in our model splits, and we try to set tough goals for car usage, because we need the space for other things, so we have model split for bike 4% and for cars 3%, shared mobility. Shared should carry a part of this, and to the left we see the travel survey, and it's really it's the basis for a lot of things that we do, but we only do it every 5 years, so it's quite a long distance between them, but it's quite it's a big thing to do, and it's costly, and if you want people to get involved, we find that this is it's a good interval, but that also means that we have to do things in between, because it's not good enough to have this every 5 years. So, but we also break this down. So all the goals are broken down into 15 sub areas. And every area has a goal on its own. And then we in these areas and the goals for every area, as you can see, in the center of the city we have quite tough goals for car traffic, but if you move to the outskirts, then we can allow more trips to be made by cars, and because that's just how the city is structured, so it's really hard to achieve the same for everything in the city, but it adds up to the big picture. And why is this important to have these broken down goals? It is because when you talk to the developers and the builders of the city and that we cooperate with, then we can share, this is how we see it here. And then of course, we follow this up, and then we say that, okay, so we've done really well in this area. We are moving fast towards the goal, and we've done this things. And in other area, maybe nothing is happening or very slow progress. And then we can consider what did we do or what didn't we do, and what can we do to the coming years. So this is really important, but as I said before, only every 5 years. So we need something more. And also this is we add all the trips up and consider also that the growth of Malmö and the city, so more inhabitants every year means more trips. And even though we distribute them more into public transport, we need to make be really tough here. And as you can see, if you look to the left here, you can see from 2018, and if you look at for example, for public transport, it's almost the double amount of trips in 2040 for the goal. So to double the amount of trips possible or being actually being made in 22 years, it's a tough goal, and we need to do the right things. And we have the same agenda for the regional trips, the commuters, that because Malmö is quite a small area, but we have a lot of the smaller cities around us that commutes to Malmö. So we set the same, or not the same goal, but we also have a goal for this commuting and in different relations. And to do this, a really easy way to measure this and monitor what's happening is we have built-in tubes in the streets, and where we don't have the built-in tubes, we put out rubber tubes in the measuring weeks, and then we use radar mostly for bikes. We have bike count some spots as well, and then we use video analysis and we also started using, but we haven't really made it reoccurring, but we started to develop in a way to measure with cellular cell phone users. So how they move, and this is also like the previous speaker was talking about the AI aspect. We can make this more accessible now, and make it depersonalize it, so we don't know exactly what person it is that's moving in what way. But so we try to add all this together. But the built-in tubes is a really good foundation that we've been using for a long time, and this we've covered Malmö in these border lines of tubes, where if you pass one of these red lines, you will be in a car, but in the center of the city, it's also for the bikes in the very center. But if you pass one of the lines, you will be counted, and so we can monitor how much traffic we have on all these lines or borders, if you will. And this we add this up what we count to with what the data we get from our public transport provider, and so we actually have a really good cooperation with them, and I think that's a key factor for us since we are putting so much pressure on this, but on the public transport. But and as you can see with the population, the dotted line, it's been steadily increasing, and we are struggling or doing a lot to try to increase the public transport, and it's been working. Of course, you see this big dip for when the corona, the pandemic, but otherwise it's been going the right way. It's the bike development that's been a little bit more up and down, and yeah. So this is just an index from how it was 2007 when we started measuring in this way, and until last year, or yeah, actually 2024. But we're getting the data for 25 soon, I hope as well. And then this is also something I think that's really a luxury for us, and it's really good to have. And I think we have in-house analysis team that makes the goal-oriented microanalysis of. They use the traffic from the SUMP, and they make a forecast based on these numbers. So, and then they put it out on our on the grid on our streets, and they say, so this is how much car traffic, or actually green is how much less car traffic it will be if we achieve the goals, and this is how much bike traffic we will have in the. So so this gets a picture, and we also have to go back, of course, and when we measure, oh, it's not exactly what the model says. No, okay, so we adjust it. So it's a work in progress all the time. But this is really good because it shows the actual effect, and makes argument for how do we need to physically rebuild or regulate the streets. And this makes it much easier for our decision makers to make tough decisions, because they have they find this comforting in a way when they can see an actual change. And then we also every second year we find it's important to, because we want to build a good city, and Marcin talked about this a little bit also, because and I think Ira mentioned this as well. So this is harder. How do we make the city better? So we try to make it more surface, make the traffic take up less surface in the city, but also we ask the attitude of the inhabitants, and so this is about the traffic situation. How do they find it? Yeah. So we're moving in the right direction, but it's always how, when you're building stuff, it will affect what do you think about the city. And then traffic safety, of course, we monitor and follow up on where is it happening, and what can we do to amend this. But I think this is many cities have a good picture of this. So it's maybe it's the easiest to monitor, but it's also very, very important to that you do the right things, that cost efficient what you do. And then, of course, greenhouse gas. This is also very important to us. We have signed up to be climate city, or European climate city, and we should be carbon neutral by 2030. So this is a really tough goal, and so we try to follow up as close as possible on this as well. So, and everything this and some more things we put into our report every year that we call the annual traffic summary. So and in the end of this, we have a assessment. How is it going, and and then what can we do for the in the budget to make this better next year. So I can share you this with you, of course, but it's Swedish. But maybe some smart Google Translate can or something can make it understandable for you. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Is this report available online already?
And I don't think so, because it's a bit of an issue. We have some what do you call it? Everything we share online has to be readable by everyone, and we don't have
accessible.
Thanks, that's the word. So we have some issues with that, because So, but I can
Okay.
I share it with you, and and then you can.
Yeah, I was thinking that we could share the link to the chat. Actually,
Yeah.
there came one question from the audience.
Okay.
How did you measure the safety? Why the safety of cars has decreased, and great to see increase of safety for bikes.
Yeah, because we have a really good report system in Sweden called Strada. It's all the police accidents and hospital reported accidents are registered. So we can just make a withdrawal from that, and it's you just have to. It doesn't cost us anything, the city. So this is actually really luxury for us. I don't know how that works in other countries, but so it's easy. The only thing is that sometimes it takes, especially the police registered accidents, can take some time before they are in the system. But I'm not sure the car why we are up. I think the most accidents we are up is in bike accidents, because we called our the scooters, the electric scooters are classified as bikes, and there's been a lot of accidents with especially young people and driving on sidewalks and stuff like that.
Okay. I hope this answered to that question. Now, Martin and Christina, would you like to comment on the speakers, on Andreas' presentation or Ritvar's presentation, or do you have any remarks you want to bring up? I think we have a few minutes for that.
I see Martin is.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I found both presentations very important, and moreover, they bring a completely different perspective. From one point, Ritvar's brought us perspective of relatively small city that, together with AI support and new technology, can start measuring important processes almost unavailable several years ago. So I think that new technology could equalize opportunities and decreases the differences between larger and smaller cities, because this camera supported by AI could bring us a very substantial amount of data to be measured. And small city has also a big opportunity, because you can monitor the most critical crossroads, and then you will get general picture of the city. In city of size of Malmö, we have to equip many crossroads or intersections with cameras. Of course, Scandinavian cities are developing their ITS and monitoring systems since the 80s of former century, so they are quite advanced. But this new cameras brings a completely new era for smaller cities. I think that now there are less and less barriers for monitoring for small cities in case of mobility. Thank you.
Christina, would you like to comment?
Martin stole my thunder. I think I was taking quite similar notes, but I also want to first of all congratulate organizers. Very well selected cases, very diverse, and very promising in terms what can you do if you are starting. But also I was again very thrilled to see Andrea's presentation on monitoring on the, and I think the main sentence the honey for my ear was that politicians feels comforted with receiving data, and I think that's also our message, which we want to convey through this round of the training, to say that it's very, very important to be transparent. It really eventually works as a result in taking decisions, and I think it. I see new question from Damian Hajduk on the Q&A box, so I think I can also cover that at the same time. Going back to the first edition of SUMPs, I think it was very, very much missed. Not in Malmö, of course, not in Scandinavian or very, very Western SUMPs, but what I faced also in my hometown in Vilnius and in several other projects I was working, the measures we were planning had a little connection with objectives we had, and they were not somehow related with the targets, so you could monitor easily. So basically, after the first round of SUMPs, we started doing monitoring, and we realized that there are a lot of measures which performance is not possible even to monitor. Is it performing well or not? Because you cannot really understand what would be a good result. Only 100 or more than 200 and so on. So I think that was, how to say, quite common disease of the first round of SUMPs. And the expectation is to eliminate this from the second round of SUMPs, especially from the ones who are coming for urban nodes, because it also have TNT requirement on the top with Annex 5 and all the articles from 40 to 42 and urban mobility indicator. So I hope it answered Damian's question. And I think the cases we had today and also Martin approach with the whole methodology and tools prepared, I think answers the topic of today. That's my idea. Not sure Ira, Martin has another comment yet.
Martin?
Yes, I would like to refer to Andreas' presentation because Andreas also pointed out on one specific, very important group of stakeholders, which especially in Polish cities bring different, let's say, political associations. I mean about developers. They are city builders, in fact. But of course, in many cases, they are associated like they are increasing city urban intensity development and so on. But having SUMP and very good measurement of modal split and targets, which are very clearly specified by example brought by Malmö, it is very, in my opinion, strong tool to discuss with developers, because developers should be obliged not only to develop shopping malls or housing, but also other types or parts of public infrastructure. Very important element, and thank you, Andreas, for bringing it for today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Martin, and also Christina for your comments and also answering this question from Damien. Now it has
apparently the question was addressed to Andreas, so maybe Andreas can also make.
Andreas, do you have a comment? I saw the question disappeared already. Maybe I can read it once more.
The question was
not work fully with SUMP. What would you expect from a potentially upgraded version like SUMP Plus?
What would I expect in what way? Sorry.
What does not work or not work fully with the SUMP?
Okay, yes. Okay, so we have, it's always about two things, I would say, immediately. It's with parking. We are working a lot with parking. We try to reduce parking because this induces car traffic, and it's, as previously mentioned, it's not generating the amount of shopping or investments as many people think. So we need to we like to reduce that, but we are working on that and successfully, I would say. But the hardest part for us that we would like to have much better is in logistics in heavy traffic, because this we have it's really complicated and it's hard to make a good partnership with the freight companies and all, both in the large scales with like regional and international and national transport, but also in the small scale with the city logistics and trying to just cooperate. So I think that would be our main target for our next SUMP is logistics. I think to improve this. We were talking about this. What? Yeah, you did like a logistic a LUMP, logistic urban mobility plan. Yeah.
SULP.
Yeah,
Sustainable
SULP.
Urban
That's it.
Logistics
Yes.
Plan.
Thanks. Yeah. So yeah, this is where we would improve the most. Yeah. So, but I think
Okay.
otherwise we've been working a lot with the measures, but that we have to making them they work a lot better all the time. But we have to iterate to make it a little bit better all the time. So you can never expect it to be perfect from the beginning, of course. So
yeah, I think this is very good where we can end iteration and like developing all the time, evaluating your activities and measures. I think this is a good time to start wrapping up. Thank you for all our panelists. Thank you, Christina, Marcin, Ritvars, and Andreas for very good presentations. I hope this gave our attendees some seed for thought. And I would like to share you one more time a reminder about our upcoming workshop next Wednesday on this topic, monitoring and evaluation, will be held on Wednesday starting at 9 Central European time. And also I'd like to remind about the SUMP clinic call for applications that is now open until 20th of February. And with these reminders and words, I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar today. And I hope to see you again in our upcoming webinars and workshops. Thank you so much.